Please be seated. The court is now in session. As scheduled, today the Chamber will hand the floor to the co-accused and their defense teams in order to make their final statement in case 002/01. And before I hand the floor over to the defense, starting from the accused Nujir, the greffier Ms. Sakalboti, could you report the attendance of the parties and individuals to today's proceeding? Sakalboti, Mr. President, for today's proceeding, all parties are present. The national political lawyer for civil party will be a little bit late this morning. Thank you. President, thank you. Security guards, can you bring the accused Nujir to the dock so that he can make his final statement? Nujir, my respect to the venerable monks who are present here today and those at the pagodas. My respect to my beloved compatriots. Honorable Court, up until now, the Chamber has already spent more than 2 years in order to determine my destiny for actions that took place in democratic Cambodia from 17 April 1975 to 6 January 1979. This is the period which I spent most of my entire life carrying out my duties to serve my country and my beloved people. Despite some of my indirect participation in this trial due to my poor health, I have paid close attention to the presentation of evidence by both the national and international co-prosecutors and the examination of all witnesses before this chamber from the holding cell under this main courtroom. Through this trial, it is clearly indicated that I was not engaged in any commission of the crimes as alleged by the co-prosecutors. In short, I am innocent in relation to those allegations. Honorable Court, when I make such a claim, probably some people who do not clearly understand the law, or those who are partial, are mocking at me. However, that is okay for me. In a very short moment, when I make my submission to the chamber, they will know that everything I say is true. In the spirit of the law, this court is created with the aim and responsibility to find the truth and justice for me and for all victims by relying on concrete, legal, and credible evidence. In contrast, up until now, the co-prosecutors have failed to present sufficient evidence in order to satisfy the elements of crimes that I stand accused of. Some of my rights are not properly guaranteed in this court, namely my right to a speedy trial, a right to legal defense, a right to a fair trial, and other rights guaranteed under national and international laws. Moreover, many doubts regarding the evidence have not been clearly clarified before the chamber, including, inter alia, the original documents and testimonies of important witnesses who can support my defense. As your honors have known, regarding this point, my lawyers have already confirmed it to the chamber clearly with proper legal foundation. However, I would like to add some other important points so that your honors can understand more clearly about my innocence and integrity concerning the above allegations. I make this claim based on three main points. 1. Absence of power to control and to prevent. Honorable Court and my beloved compatriots, on 9 July 2013, I told the chamber once already that I did not have any authority or connection with the commission of the crimes during the Democratic Cambodia period. And once again, I would like to reiterate that during the Democratic Cambodia period, I had only three main roles, namely, as a Deputy Secretary of the Communist Party of Cambodia. In this position, I was in charge of dissemination and educational propaganda about policy through CPK members. Regarding the content of the dissemination, I never educated CPK members to exercise arbitrary authority or to behave badly towards the people. Instead, I educated them to love, respect, and serve the people and the country. I never educated or instructed them to mistreat or kill people, to deprive them of food, or to commit any genocide. I always taught and educated CPK members and soldiers the main principles of the CPK in order to make them do their work and serve the people properly. Specifically, I educated them the principles stipulated in Article 2 of the CPK's statute, so that they could understand clearly their responsibility as the CPK members for their participation in social activities. Article 2 of the CPK statute states as follows. Every party member has the following duties. 1. Duties amongst the popular masses. A. Propagandize and educate the popular masses on party politics, ideology, and organization, and mingle closely with the popular masses, the workers and peasants in the unions, cooperatives, and the Revolutionary Army. Must be highly responsible to the popular masses, serve the popular masses with all the heart and unconditionally, be polite to the popular masses and learn from the popular masses. B. Hotly and constantly agitate the popular masses movement, especially the worker peasants, popular masses in the unions, cooperatives, and the Revolutionary Army in connection with the task of national defense and building democratic Cambodia in the direction of socialist revolution and building socialism. 2. Internal duties are point D. Always and absolutely preserve, strengthen, and expand internal solidarity within the party. Dear Honors, based on these principles, it clearly states that the party had the purpose to equip its members with high responsibility, to stay closely with the people, be kind to the people, take care of the people, and learn from the people. Especially, the party encouraged the Revolutionary Army of Cambodia and people to be patriotic and protect the motherland. Moreover, I always educated party members to refrain from exercising arbitrary authority, from womanizing, drinking, corruption, and gambling, etc. Especially, the party educated its members to have solidarity within the party and amongst the popular masses. What I have raised above is an example of my work that I did in my capacity as Deputy Secretary of the CPK during the decade period. In short, what I educated and taught all CPK members and the Army is the building of knowledge for them to be patriotic, protect the nation, love the people, and have good internal solidarity for the purpose of protecting and building a country, for it to develop and prosper, to have real independence, and to absolutely prevent any country, big or small, near or far, from invading and colonizing Cambodia. smashing of invading enemy is the responsibility of the Revolutionary Army of Cambodia for the protection of its motherland. For the same token, security strengthening and internal political stability must be implemented properly so that the revolution can develop and prosper. Based on general viewpoint, this rule is not different from any rule implemented by country leaders around the world who have to bear such responsibility in order to maintain security and protect their countries. Countries all around the world always legislate law to serve politics and control their countries. If anyone violates the law, that person will be punished in accordance with the law of that country. My second role as Vice President of the Communication Committee with Vietnamese Workers' Party. Relationship with Vietnam and its people had long been established. The relationship was further expanded upon the inception and movement of the CPK through the organization of Communication Committee with Vietnam. The committee was established at all levels, from the central to zone. At the central level, Pol Pot was the president and I was vice president of that committee. However, because Pol Pot had many tasks to fulfill, I was appointed by the CPK Standing Committee as vice president to be in charge of this affair on his behalf. That was the occasion that I had an opportunity to hold meetings with the Communist Party of Vietnam very often. From the time I was in charge of that affair, I learned of the Vietnamese trickery and many secrets toward Cambodia. I recalled that when I joined the Communist Party of Cambodia movement in 1950, Vietnamese army, that is Viet Cong, had its presence already throughout Cambodia. They had their elements infiltrated in the CPK movement, both in the Revolutionary Army of Cambodia, amongst civilian leaders, and within the population of Cambodia. I also recall that when the CPK was initially created, it neither had its office nor headquarters. It was under the complete control and leadership of the Vietnamese Communist Party. However, in early 1964, Pol Pot liberated the CPK from the Vietnamese control. Pol Pot and a number of the CPK's Central Committee members created its headquarters called Office 100. Later on, that office was relocated to Ratanakiri province. And at that time, the office was not completely independent yet. Vietnamese military base located in Zone 5 in Vietnam employed all kinds of tactics and strategies to control the CPK politically, economically, and militarily. In the year of 1960, North Vietnam used Cambodia as their military base to fight the South Vietnam, that is the Thieu Kỳ. At the same time, the CPK movement expanded dramatically after the coup d'etat against Prince Norodom Sihanouk on 18 March 1970, which was led by the United States and traitorous Lon Nol, Srimatta, and Seung Ngok Thanh. At that time, the People's Revolutionary Army of Cambodia was created and expanded quickly. Also, by that time, Vietnam recruited some 3,000 Cambodian people to receive training and education on technical skill, politics, and psychology in North Vietnam. When they returned in mid-1973, they were appointed to work in the party line and within the People's Revolutionary Army. In short, Vietnam tried to employ all kinds of trickery to control the CPK militarily, politically, economically, and financially. Nevertheless, CPK leaders envisaged that what Vietnam had done toward Cambodia was not consistent with the CPK policy. In early 1973, with the efforts to liberate the CPK led by Pol Pot, who was then the CPK secretary, and as the war in South Vietnam intensified, Vietnamese army decided to loosen its grip on armed force and authority in Cambodia and refocus its effort to fight with the South Vietnam. That was an opportunity for the CPK and the army to gain independence and strengthen its force. The CPK under Pol Pot's leadership implemented its principles of independence, self-mastery, self-reliance, and deciding its own nation and own destiny. On 17 April 1975, People's Revolutionary Army of Cambodia gained victory over Lon Nol regime, and 2 weeks later, South Vietnam was also liberated. The People's Revolutionary Army of Cambodia liberated Phnom Penh by itself, and they achieved this great victory, and the party gained full independence in managing the country. However, even though the Communist Party of Vietnam announced in 1973 that Vietnamese army had withdrawn and had no direct control over the CPK movement, in reality, the Vietnamese armed force and many Vietnamese secret agents had long infiltrated in the CPK and People's Revolutionary Army of Cambodia in all places around the country. Those people did not return to Vietnam. They carried out their task covertly and overtly with Vietnamese ethnic minority and some Cambodian people. At that time, we failed to realize the depth of Vietnamese trickery. However, later on, we clearly understood their trickery through the following 4 evidentiary points. 1. Reports that Cambodian people were deprived of food and forced to work hard at local bases. 2. Cambodian people were killed. 3. Lower-level cadres did not report the said situation to upper echelon. And 4. Some soldiers had friction and defected to Vietnam, especially at its zone. The aforementioned points demonstrated that Vietnam had their agents infiltrated in the party rank and the army in order to destroy revolution, kill Cambodian people, and annex Cambodian territory, which had been a long-term ambition of Vietnam. Actually, on 7 January 1979, Vietnam invaded Cambodia when they had destroyed the revolutionary foundation at almost all the local bases by starving and arbitrarily killing the people and creating mistrust within the CPK. Vietnam had exercised its control over Cambodia from 1979 to 1991 and seized its control only when Cambodia had Paris Peace Accord on 23 October 1991. Acts of depriving food from the people and the killing of Cambodian people were contradictory to the vision and policy of the CPK, and based on this ground, I can conclude that those acts were really the acts committed by Vietnam. The CPK and I were very painful when we learned that we, the CPK, were deceived by Vietnam. That led to the deaths of our own people and the destruction of our country. However, it seemed a little too late to recover from the situation. When Vietnam invaded Cambodia, diplomatic relations between both countries was severed. National defense and military commands to engage in battle were the exclusive responsibility of Son Sen, who was the Ministry of National Defense of the Democratic Cambodia regime. That was the time my position in the Communication Committee with Vietnamese Workers' Party completely ceased. 3. My role as President of the People's Representative Assembly. Honorable Court, after the liberation on 17 April 1975, I was appointed as President of People's Representative Assembly. Legally speaking, my position was to be in charge of legislation. At that time, the war in Cambodia had just ended, and the war with Vietnam continued. We did not have sufficient time to legislate many laws in this short time. In addition, considering the situation Cambodia was in at the time, legislation was not a main priority. In line with the communism doctrine, leadership of Democratic Cambodia, as well as that of other communist countries, was one that the party leads and the state governs. In this sense, the party provides principles in its leading, while the state refers to the government or the executive branch, which has the authority and power to govern the entire country. Indeed, only the government has complete authority in issuing orders or instructions or in implementing actions in governing the country. In that regime, despite the clear distinction in the separation of power into three branches, namely the executive, legislative, and judiciary, as stipulated in the decade's constitution, it was merely symbolic in reality. The legislative and judicial branches did not fully function, and in fact, only the executive branch was fully functional, with Pol Pot appointed as Prime Minister. Hence, Pol Pot had overall executive power in leading and controlling the party line and the government, as he was both the party secretary and Prime Minister. In this position, no one could replace him. Based on this, it shows clearly that I had no effective power in governing and implementing the tasks of the executive branch. Concerning other allegations for my other positions, I would like to clarify that, besides the above positions, I had never had any other position. I was dumbfounded when the co-prosecutors alleged that I used to be an acting Prime Minister, member of Central Committee on Military Affairs, and linked to S-21 management. That statement is, intentionally or otherwise, is completely untrue and not backed up by any clear evidence. Pol Pot had his deputy prime ministers, namely Ieng Sary, Son Sen, and Von Wet. Therefore, there was no reason for Pol Pot to appoint me as acting prime minister in addition to his existing deputies. And indeed, he could not appoint me as an acting prime minister when he was absent from the country, simply because I did not have any position in the executive branch. If he did so, it would be against the party's policy. Concerning the allegation that I was member of the Central Committee for Military Affairs and linked to the S-21 management, it is also not true. Indeed, I never dealt with those affairs. Son Sen personally supervised those affairs. I never met, never supervised, or ordered Dutch to mistreat or kill anyone. Everyone should be aware that soldiers or security personnel will never listen to anyone besides their own commanders. Therefore, there is no reason that Dutch should listen to me. Frankly speaking, I heard the name of Dutch only after 1979. Dutch's statement that I supervised S-21 was intentional, as he wanted to evade his responsibility for what happened at S21, and he wanted me to serve a life sentence like him, because Son Sen died and he was convicted for life. A person who is under such circumstance never speaks the truth, as he is full of anger and feels hopeless in life. And that is the real reason for him to implicate me. In short, my defense have asserted to your honors that I did not engage in any of those tasks, and there is no evidence to prove that I did it. And based on that, it proves that I did not have any effective power or position to have a direct control over the forces or local authority. Therefore, is there any reason for me to order, instigate, or prevent perpetrators from committing the crimes in that period? And I submit that your honors kindly consider this. I would like to categorically declare that the purpose of my participation in the DK regime was to liberate the country from colonization and to defend Cambodian territory from invasion by neighboring countries whose ambition had for long been to swallow Cambodia. I love my people. I did not have any reason or intention to mistreat or to kill my people or to commit genocide against my own nation. Lack of evidence in the allegations, and I'd like to touch upon the killing of Lunol soldiers at Tulpu Chirei. I would like to sincerely clarify that I am not aware of any killing of former Lunol soldiers at Tulpu Chirei in Pusat province. After the liberation on 17 April 1975, as far as I know, the CPK never established any policy to authorize its own force to kill former Lunol soldiers or any person for that matter. The CPK's policy for prisoners of war was to forgive and pardon. Those soldiers were forcibly drafted into the army to fight and die on their behalf. And they were indeed the children of the people who were living in the CPK liberated zones. In principle, to make a revolution means to gather forces. If those people were killed as alleged by the co-prosecutors, it was against the CPK policy, and as a result, it would compel their parents and relatives to take side with the enemy, thus strengthening it, or they would turn against the CPK. If it was true that those Lunol soldiers were killed, it would have been the decision of the lower cadres who committed the wrongdoings at their own discretion or out of one's revenge that occurred during the war. Related to this point, some witnesses testified before the chamber that Khmer Rouge soldiers gathered those Lunol soldiers for a meeting which took place at the Posat Provincial Town Hall 1 week after the liberation on 17 April 1975. Those witnesses gave inconsistent statements during trial and, in some instances, contradicting own statements that was made before the investigating judges. For instance, Lam Sat made his statement before the investigating judges that about 3,000 former Lunar soldiers attended the meeting at Posat Provincial Town Hall, and later they were taken and executed. Those soldiers were transported by 20 to 30 trucks. Each was loaded with approximately 30 soldiers. At trial, Lam Sa testifies that there were approximately 2,000 Lunar soldiers who attended the meeting at Posat, and they were transported by 10 to 15 trucks. Another witness, Ung Chat, testifies that there were 200 soldiers, and later changed his mind and said that there were only between 100 to 150 soldiers. One witness of Tet Sambat's video entitled One Day at Tulpu Chray said there were around 10,000 Lunar soldiers who were taken and killed at Tulpu Chray. Furthermore, some witnesses said that they secretly entered the area and saw dead bodies scattered all over the place, and they were without any military uniform or backpack. Others claimed that there were many backpacks. I ask your honors to be with me for a moment and consider this question together. Is there any reason for those people to risk their life and enter the area amidst such a dangerous situation just to see those corpses? If there was such killing, and I submit, it would be a dangerous place that no ordinary person dared to go near. When your honors heard those testimonies, you must ask yourself this question: are they credible and reliable? And the simple answer is, their testimonies cannot be relied upon or used because they are full of doubts and filled with lies. And I'd like to submit the following question. As I was one of the leaders, do you think we have time to deal with such a matter? We had overall and pressing task to resolve in Phnom Penh, especially during the first few months. The important task was to resolve people's livelihood and defend the country from any attempt to control Cambodia by Communist Party of Vietnam and opposing parties. Furthermore, I'd like to respond to the allegation made by the co-prosecutors that the CPK exercised its revolutionary violence even before 1975. This claim shows that they simply looked at events unfolded in Cambodia from just one corner. They pretend not to know, see, or hear anything from another angle. In legal jargon, this would mean victor's justice. Let me remind you that before I made my decision to join the armed struggle for the cause of liberating the country, many CPK members and civilians were secretly executed, arrested, tortured, and disappeared every day. Every Cambodian still can remember these events. This kind of violence existed in every Cambodian regime, and victims in those events were all farmers and innocent people. And I'd like to begin that with the French colonialism. France colonized Cambodia for almost a century. The regime authority used violence to make arrests and killed unarmed peasants at Krang Lieu village in Kampong Chhnang province. Those peasants could not afford to pay tax and had to force themselves to protest for and demand justice. In the end, the peasants were the losers, and as a result, their village names was changed to Village of Bestiality or Phum Derichan in Khmer. Is this not violence? In the Sangkum Riesniyum, the powerful bulldoze houses and paddy fields belonging to peasants at Ondak Hebt in Samlot, Battambang province. They grabbed the land of the people who had lived there for many generations. When they protested to protect their property, soldiers indiscriminately opened fire at those unarmed people, regardless whether they were men, women, young or old. Worse than that, the authorities tried to arrest and kill more people. They were so scared, and as a result, they fled into the forest. In turn, the authorities accused those people who were the original landowners of being Khmer Rouge. Is this not the creation of violence and cause of people's suffering? In the Tribunal regime, which was supported by the United States, Tribunal soldiers sexually raped women, robbed people of their properties, and killed people everywhere. They beheaded people and had their heads displayed on fence posts. They committed this act merely upon their suspicion that those people opposed their regime, and they were implicated as members of the Khmer Rouge Revolution. In addition, Tribunal soldiers systematically raped women, plundered their properties, and forcibly evacuated them from their homes. Vietnamese minorities were massacred everywhere in Cambodia. Furthermore, the United States dropped several tons of its bombs on the people's villages, homes, rice fields, and pagodas. As a result, many tens of thousands of civilian people, including children, the elderly, pregnant women, and the disabled were killed. Is this not a crime against humanity or genocide? In 1979, Vietnam invaded and occupied Cambodia, and in the following years, they deployed their artillery to shell refugee camps situated along Cambodia-Thai border, causing homes to be burned, properties destroyed, and losses of many lives, including the lives of children, women, the elderly, and the disabled. In addition, they initiated a plan known as K5 to force civilian people to enter the forest for the purpose of transporting ammunition and digging trenches for soldiers to defend the power that they earned from their invasion of Cambodia. Many hundreds of thousands of people died as a result. Is this not a plan to kill people? In 1997, two political factions fought each other in the middle of Phnom Penh to challenge for power. The fighting destroyed and burnt many houses and properties and killed many innocent people. A number of Phnom Penh prisoners of war were killed after they had surrendered. As an example, Ho Sok, a senior Phnom Penh leader, was killed within the compound of the Ministry of Interior, where he was arrested as hostage. Is this not a violence or crime? For all the events that I read about, are they not violence or crime against humanity? All of these can be used as evidence to compare with the situation under the CPK. If the CPK is alleged of resorting to the use of violence before 1975, why do the co-prosecutors fail to provide just a small glimpse into the reality in regards to the events occurred as the other side committed toward the Cambodian people? I can see that the co-prosecutors made an effort to highlight the act of killing each other during the war, and tried to link it to the killing that was immediately taken place after the end of the war. Their attempt is to show to your honors that the CPK made such a systematic plan. This linkage is unfair. If the killing during a war is treated as a systematic plan, why the co-prosecutors failed to prosecute the other party to the war? In fact, the CPK made plan to engage in a war to liberate the country from destruction. Combat strategy was used to defeat the enemy. And I submit that this is not an illegal act. People in many countries around the world fight their respective government for what they believe is a proper cause. And demand for changes, especially for right to decide own destiny and own nation. Allow me to give your honors some examples. Those countries include Sri Lanka, Syria, Libya, Vietnam, and Iraq. All of these countries used to have civil war. During such war, fractional groups designed plans to destroy their enemy. If Your Honor consider that combative planning for a war designed by a victorious party is a criminal intent, as alleged by the co-prosecutors, leaders of those countries, whether they are government leaders or opposition group leaders, must be prosecuted, especially the United States, Vietnam, and other Cambodian leaders. They should not bring to trial only the body of the crocodile and allow its head or tail to evade the net of the law. This is so unfair for me. I would like Your Honor to clearly distinguish a plan to liberate the country and a plan to kill people after the war. These 2 points are totally different from each other. Strategic combat planning or destroying the enemy ended when the war itself ended. However, the intention to kill people is a new phase by the authority when they are in charge of governing the country. Moreover, I recall that this chamber limits the scope of this trial to hear only the facts that occurred between 17 April 1975 and 6 January 1979. Though I do not know much about the law, I understand that what the co-prosecutors allege concerning my activities before 17 April 1975 is wrong and bears no legal value. In short, what the co-prosecutors raised regarding revolutionary violence before 1975 and relied upon it as a legal basis to satisfy the elements of crime with their intention to prosecute me is simply incorrect. I submit that Your Honours reject this allegation. On the matter of evacuation, President, the accused Nuon Chea, please pause. Yes, counsel, you may proceed. Sonarun. Mr. President, I'm counsel for Nuon Chea, and I would ask Your Honor to allow my clients to rest for 10 to 15 minutes. He spent 1 hour already and he seems exhausted. Please allow him to rest briefly. President, thank you. And the time is also appropriate for a short break. We will take a short break now and return at 10:15. Security guards, please bring the accused back to his table with his counsel.